Welcome to the CTE's AI Studio Reflection Podcast. In this series, we showcase how faculty are experimenting with artificial intelligence in their teaching and research at SMU. Each episode features a professor sharing their innovation experience and takeaways from their projects with the goal to spark ideas, share resources, and encourage experimentation in teaching and research at SMU. So let's get into it. Please introduce yourself, your department, and what course you are using AI in.
Thank you, Constantin. I'm Ömer Özak. I'm an associate professor of economics. And what I'm going to talk about is kind of like the way I've introduced AI into my semester project in my economic growth class for undergrads. I've been teaching this class last 3 years or so. It's kind of a newish class. I used to teach it a decade ago where uh, I was given the opportunity to teach it. It was kind of a different semester and everything than my usual class, which was more like intro kind of course. And one of the things I noticed when I first taught it is that students really like to get their hands dirty with data. And right, students who I had taught in the previous semester a different class where it was very theoretical, very like really creating the basic knowledge, and they hated that class. Now they suddenly, when you confronted them with data and regressions and doing answering questions of the real world, they really got really excited. So I always wanted to bring that back, kind of like getting students into answering questions that they found interesting, while at the same time teaching them some of the skills that the labor market really appreciates and that we think are really important, especially if you're an economist, right? And so I had struggled a little bit because that forced me to teach them things like coding within the semester. So you're trying to teach them economic growth and the theories and the facts and the data, and at the same time teaching them coding. And coding is one thing that is kind of boring. I mean, I think I don't want to teach it, they don't want to learn it. And AI actually gave me this great opportunity to kind of sidestep the look. This is how you write an if statement. This is how you write a for statement. And then, right, I still show them with the basic idea so that it doesn't look like this weird alphabet on the screen where you don't know what's going on, even though some of the languages we use, especially I use Python, is very human readable in a sense, right? You kind of understand. But I give them the basics, but I really try to teach them how to use AI in a good way that will allow you to really have a leg up, I hope, in the job market, right? It is a really difficult job market. I think that students that come with all these skills, that are able to do good presentations, that bring new insights, new ways of presenting analysis, will do much better, right? And that's kind of like what I've been trying to do in this class.
Good. So, what kind of tools do you use to get your students to use more AI in a way that is effective and preserves intact your learning objectives?
Well, I basically start almost like from day zero. They have to start interacting with AI, right? And we have a little discussion in terms of how they see the use, who else uses it. I always like to ask them, like, okay, show of hands, who's using AI? Show of hands, who's using AI? Even if you're told that you shouldn't use AI, right? And I'm really very open about it. The fact that I'm very pro AI, right? And I really think that all of them should learn how to use it, but use it in a sensible, ethical, morally correct way, right? And so, I mean, the first assignment I give them with AI is basically, look, think about some event that you want to organize, a dinner with your girlfriend, a trip with your family, something that you want to do, and work with the AI to figure a plan, right? And which I hope that shows them, look, I mean, there are boring things that AI can help you with, right? But in the end, if you have a drive, a question, it can actually help you solve that question. But you have to bring something to the table. You cannot just say, like, hey, AI, make a plan for me and my girlfriend, right? If the AI doesn't know you, doesn't know your girlfriend, you should bring something to the table and say, like, look, hey, my girlfriend likes this, I like this. I'm trying to think about this. Perhaps this is going to be my 6 month anniversary. Let's plan something. I want something romantic or I want something funny. I don't know, right? And so, kind of like that, you need to bring something to the AI. You're just not. wait for it to give you an answer, right? Because in the end, especially for this should be something very personal, right? And then we kind of start playing around with the AI in class. So one of the things I try to do is I give them a questionnaire in Google Forms where basically I'm asking things that that should be answerable with statistics, right? And so, for example, what's the share of women that are married between so and so age and that use contraceptives in 1970, right?
Okay.
There's only one source of data that has this data, and there should be a unique number, right? Then I give them more questions about elasticities and things like that would require a little bit more work in terms of data manipulation to be able to answer this. And I assign randomly AIs first of all, that people should learn that there's more than ChatGPT and Claude. So I assign them multiple AIs and I have them answer this form. And the first thing, and then the nice thing with Google Forms is that I can then show them the answer and kind of like the dispersion of answers of students. So I do this. Um, and interestingly, even though AIs have become so much better every generation, so I teach this once a year, the dispersion hasn't changed,
Mm.
right? So these questions that have unique answers still have a wide range of answers if you allow the AI to do it like this. So the following class, I kind of like do the same analysis, but now I tell them, like, okay, let's go into the World Bank. Let's download the big data set of the World Bank. Let's upload it into the AI. And let's see if now we get the same answer. We all have the same data. We should all get the same answer. And still, interestingly, we don't get it, right? Which kind of brings me to the second part of what I've been trying to do in the class is that I want them to learn that you cannot just throw things in the AI, right? It will make mistakes. And if you just get this without code or anything that explains how it got to the answer, you don't know why it's wrong, right? So notice in the first step, we didn't even know what data it was hallucinating or pulling or anything. In the second one, we gave it the data, but we still don't know if it actually used it. One, two, if it used it correctly, right? And so, and in their jobs, most of them will not be able to upload the data of the company, right? And so again, because of privacy, so I tell them, look, okay, we use a computational environment called DigNode that allows us to run code and bring data and all these things. So basically, I teach them how to now, okay, notice that asking the AI doesn't work. Giving the data to AI doesn't work. Let's kind of ask the AI to write code for us that we can do the analysis we want, right? And then we start working with this and we try to see, first of all, that then we all get the same answer, right? Of course, and this again where I try to play with them to like force the AI to provide code, for example, to do graphical things, right? And the nice thing is that in general, the AI is very good at coding, right? Doesn't make usually mistakes. Um, but if they make a mistake or it does something that you don't like, you immediately see it, right? Uh, but if I give you some again to do it with numerically, it gives you code. It will provide. It may run, but you still don't know it's right or not, right? So this is where like I try to teach them, look, you have to be careful. You need to somehow be able to verify the AI or know sufficiently well what's going on, what's writing, what it's doing, to be able to figure out if it's right or not, right? And that's kind of, and I try to show them examples of all kinds of issues that can arise that I've been, I faced myself before, right? And I think this is something that it's not that AI made it new, right? I mean, until even before AI, we would write code and we
Mhm.
kind of had to somehow verify or trust that it was right. And I usually tell my PhD students, for example, like, look, write the code and have an example that you have solved numerically with calculator or Excel that you know the answers to make sure that the code is actually right, right? Because otherwise you don't really know, right? And then you have to play a little bit the intuition of, is this giving me something that makes no sense or not, right? And so, and then of course, I just let them go wild in terms of let's all compete to who has the best graphical representations. the analysis you want to do, right? Again, there's a lot of, I kind of, now with AI, we are always thinking like, how much do we need to know before we're able to do things? How much do students need to know before right? It's kind of like how much math you need to learn before you can do the calculator. Um, and it's hard to quite get a right answer, right? But I feel like last decade or more, I think we've been focused too much in the technicalities and not in the deep underlying what's going on issue, right? And so, for example, I remember when I was an undergrad, I had to run regressions by hand in a sense, right? You had to take the column of the x's, the y's, do all the products, do the sums to get the coefficient. I never understood what the objective of that was. It's not like you were learning regression by doing this. You get an intuition. The intuition is in the formula already, right? And hopefully, if there's some graphical presentation of this, you get the intuition. Now we can just outsource this technicality to the machine. Of course, again, you have to trust that it's actually doing the correct thing, right? But interestingly is that if you explain to students what the idea is, right? Or for example, most of my students, at least half the class, has never taken econometrics. So I have to, in one class, kind of cover a lot of econometrics to teach them, okay, what's a regression, right? But forget about the technical. What is intuitively a regression, right? It's perfectly. And there are many ways of fitting curves. And I'd show them, okay, why is OLS, for example, ordinary least squares, such a great tool, right, to fit lines, right, and etc. And I teach them like, okay, if you look graphically, does this suggest what kind of regression domain it suggests? And we talk about other methods. The nice thing is that now with AI, if they understood the idea and they understood the method, sometimes they come up with projects that a PhD student would also come up with, and they're able to actually set up the data and do the analysis that, because of the technicalities, used to be something that an undergrad could not do, but now they actually can do it, right? And so uh, I think it's a wonderful tool. And of course, a student that can do this and goes to the job market, I think has a great advantage, right? And suddenly they're able to do analysis that may have taken them 5 years to learn post-graduation, right? And so, but of course, you have to keep pushing them for them to really explain what they're doing, why they're doing. Why do you think this is the correct way of thinking about this way, etc. So it's kind of changing the technicalities for kind of more essential parts of the analysis, I think. And that's kind of like, I think, a cool way in which AI has really helped us,
Yeah. So tell
at
me
least in this
how.
class.
So there's some things that I'm trying to understand. So one, the AI couldn't come up with the answer by themselves. Then we fed it data, and then the answers were still different. And then the only way to kind of get to it was to get code out of AI that then you could run. What was the
Hmm.
software? Deep Note or
Deep note. Hmm.
Deep Note, and then the Deep Note would then use this code that the AI provided to the student to then get the correct data out.
Hmm.
And how do you make sure that even that is correct? Like, how do you assure that this wasn't another just mistake by the machine?
Oh, that's easy because I do know Python. I do have the data. I know what the real answer is, right? And that's the thing, right? And so, and that's where again, this what I try to tell them, like, look, you need to somehow verify that number, right? Because again, it will run, and now we may all agree, but it may all be wrong, right? And that's a difficult thing. But it's again, it's a difficult thing that's not new because of AI, right? I mean, let's say if I do something wrong with the cleaning the data and I run a regression, I will get something, but
Mm,
it will be wrong, right? It becomes a lot of work in terms of ensuring that it's correctly done, etc., right? And it's the same things we need to do now in the AI world. It may be a little bit more difficult in the sense that if you don't know any coding, you may not be able to identify the mistake in the code, right?
yeah.
And so that's where, like, I mean, again, using multiple AIs helps you, right? You can take the code from one, put it in the other one, and say, like, oh, I'm trying to do this. Is this correct? Right? The verification of the technical part, right? But again, I think like these are not new AI problems. These are problems that have been there. I mean, like anything that's done numerically, unless you do it almost, and even if you do it by hand, it's like nothing ensures that you made the algebra correctly, right? Um, so while of course other things it's very clear, right? But again, this is where like I tell them like, okay, you need to look at the data, right? If your data is supposed to have millions of observations, then when you plot it, there are only three, something is wrong, right? Or if your intuition says that the relationship between these two variables should be negative, right? And you read it in the papers and you plot it and it's positive, then clearly there's something wrong with your data, right? And so kind of like, but these are things that we've faced along the, I think forever, right? It is not a new AI thing. I think just we're struggling more with how much of the technicality do I need to provide students uh, now that we are in an AI world, right? And it's really difficult. I really don't have a good answer, right? I mean,
Yeah.
again, if you think about math, of course, day zero of math class, I could just teach you to use a calculator that would break uh, the teaching of math. That would make no sense, right?
Mhm.
But that's mostly because we're not teaching you to do algebra only for the algebra and doing the number. It's because we're teaching you to think and do a certain process of thinking, right, and evaluating. And I think the only thing is that we need to figure out now is how much of the technicality in our different like areas we can move out and how much we can stay with kind of like the more core concepts, core problems, core ideas
Right.
without destroying like this training on how to think about something. I think that's kind of where the
Yeah.
difficulty lies.
Do you have any tools that you'd like to show us you're using in class to help your students come up with better projects or
Yes.
better results?
So basically, I mean, we've been since SMU had the coalition for AI. We had basically access to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT has this really great tool to create bots, right? So you can train your a bot to do things the way you want. And so here, for example, I had created for this class in particular two bots for the project. One is to help you do computations in a way that's not simply the way that a computer engineer would do, right? One of the problems with AI is that it tends to write code and do things like CS PhD, in a sense, right? Which it may be correct, but I feel it makes sometimes things much more difficult than it should be and much more difficult to read. And again, if you're not an expert, easier code to read helps you understand when things are right or wrong. And so I created a bot that used all my material, my coding material that I had written for my students, and is trained on that so it will actually behave and give answers of code in a way that I would have done it, or as close as possible as I would have done, right? And so, for example, here I can ask it, let me go to the other one. Mm, Let's go here, let's ask it to generate data for this, right? And so here it will use packages that I use, and it will download the data in the way that I would do it, right? It has like kind of it likes to create definitions of functions um, more than, but it kind of guides them in the same way that I would have done it, which is just okay now. And I teach them how to find out the name of these indicators. For example, if you want GDP per capita or you want population, and how you would create this, right? And so here, let's say I also want data on patents, and then it will give us, for example, additional code to do patent data, right? And so it's helping them. And then, of course, once you're here, you can now go, let me think, where did I log in? I think here, DeepNote. If I go to DeepNote, in my class, now we have all these nodes, and so they can just paste it here and run it in this computational environment, right? And so I've trained them on how to use this, and we've been playing around. We have a lot of notebooks that teach them different aspects of data analysis, cleaning, working with different types of data, maps, etc., visualizations, right? And so this helps them to kind of move from how do I do this? How do I get the code to work and I do it in a clean way, right? So that's kind of one. And then I had my experience was that the other issue that students faced a lot is they've never had to come up with a project that they have to write, right? And so they tended to be very wide-ranging projects, very broad and different. I mean, so some of the ideas actually are like PhD thesis level questions, right? Or even worse, they are like really research project agendas for 20 years, right? And so, and they don't know, of course, right? And so what I did was create a different bot that basically helps them by asking them questions about what they would like to study to kind of get a unique question and help them try to find data and what kind of analysis you could do and things like that, right? These again things that, for example, I'm not sure what project I should be about, right? I have no idea. So many interests, right? It may start asking you questions about like, okay, what kind of interests you? So let's say, uh, I am interested in poverty around the world. Right. And then notice
I
that,
see.
of course, this
So
is it
yeah.
immediately tells you like, wait a minute, this is kind of a too broad a question. That's what kind of questions, right? And so perhaps right. So here it already suggests, right? What about global poverty interests you? Are you mainly puzzled by some countries have remained poor while others have become rich, or is there a different aspect of poverty? Right. So perhaps I'm actually interested on the effects of poverty on health, right? Perhaps that's a different aspect, right? And so now it will try to give me, okay, let's keep, and so it keeps asking you, right? And
Mhm.
it was like the prompt of the bot is such that it doesn't really suggest the answer to these
Mm.
questions. It really keeps asking. It's kind of this a Socratic method of I keep asking you until we get where you want to get. And we try to figure out not only the question, but then we try to move into what kind of data is there that you could answer this, right? Because that's the other problem that many students face is that they have this amazing question, right? And that happens to many of us. But then there's no data to actually answer it, especially no data to answer it in less than 6 months, right? And so again, and so it also has in like the sources. I have provided it like all these different sources of data, so it knows what it is, what kind of data is available, and it helps them figure out how they could test or do an analysis based on this data. Right? So these are kind of two of the tools I provide to them to help them start the project, and once it's started, to kind of improve eh, how the analysis is going to work. Right?
Okay, now tell me about your students. How do they react to seeing these bots or to seeing your method of teaching using AI? Do they like it? Do they reject it? What have been the responses from your students?
Yeah, let's say in class you never notice anyone that rejects it directly, right? And so, but for example, some in the teacher evaluations, some of the students actually have said like, "Oh, I find it kind of unfair that students are using AI for this,
Mm.
right?" Or right. Although they tend to complain more about, I have another bot that's for training for the exam, for example, right? And so, um, But since I'm providing them with bots that everyone has, so I always want to have equality in that sense. I really want them to all have access to the same. So that has kind of disappeared. In general, I think that what they find is kind of shocking is that I'm perhaps the most open faculty they've had, or the most open class where they actually are allowed and forced to use AI, because it seems like still there's a lot of courses where AI is forbidden,
Mhm.
right? And so they actually appreciate the class a lot. I'm not sure if they care so much about the topics we study, but they really do enjoy, as I said, getting their hands dirty and learn, and they see the potential for the job market, right? And so they, in a sense, they don't see this as just like, oh, let us do things here because me as a faculty, I think that this is something you should know, without them really fully understanding that this will be important in the future. They
Yeah.
really see the immediate benefit in a sense, right? And I think and many of them actually right afterwards. I had one student that graduated and then emailed me like 2 weeks afterwards, right, saying like, "Look, you have no idea how useful your class has been for my job right now. It just has been wonderful because it gave me all these tools that I didn't have just before, right?" And so, in a sense, the and they are also like shocked by all the things they are able to do, right? And so, in a sense, it's been like very positive so far. We'll see how things advance. Again, I see differences from year to year, both in the AI and the students, the job market, and so we'll just have to keep adapting.
Yeah, not that long ago, it used to be that the way you differentiate the more prepared students from the least prepared students was by the amount of studying that they had done. And that study would resolve, I'm assuming, in your class in better ability to, let's say, make that code that now the AI just gives everybody, both the prepared students and the less prepared students. How do you end up differentiating in your assessment strategy who the better students are, the more prepared, the ones that will actually succeed?
Well, again, here prepared is a different thing. I mean, yeah. So note that in the end, for the projects, it's always about how much time you're willing to invest, right? And how much interest you have in this, right? And so notice that before AI, you would do the project the day before, and you would do a crappy project, right? Even with AI, the people who are not really doing the work, you just notice it, right? I mean, especially because now really the students that are really involved and are working hard, the projects are a different level, right? I mean, I could not find it to show you, but last semester I had a student that created for the final project a website where you could basically look at the opportunity, economic opportunity, and the cost of education in all the counties in the US, right? This is a project that took a lot of time, clearly, a lot of back and forth with the AI. It's not something that you can just tell it like, oh, in 5 minutes it's done. And it's a project that 2 years ago, none of my students would have been even able to think about doing, right? And the same thing, even for the analysis and the way it's written and the graphs that people do, you just see it. I mean, again, AI is just giving you better tools. But if you're not investing in getting the project forward and making it better, well, you just notice it immediately, right? And so uh, again, when you're saying that they were prepared and did better at coding, in the end, that was also kind of a problem, right? Because sometimes you had these students who had these great ideas, great
Mhm.
projects, but that had zero uh, coding experience, right? And especially this happened with female students a lot because for some reason they tend to be less exposed to coding. But now that thing disappeared, right? Suddenly you have the students having these great ideas, and now they have ways of actually executing those ideas, right? And then now they're not afraid of actually tackling some of these things, right? So, for example, I remember one time I made the mistake in the first day of class. I said that, oh, we will be coding. Suddenly, I lost a third of my female students,
Oh
right?
no.
And that's kind of terrible because you don't want students to escape being exposed to certain topics, especially like I feel this is a class where it's not really about finance or interest. And so in a sense, the gender interest is a little bit different, right? We talk about fertility, we talk about health, we talk about human capital, other things that we found that in general female students tend to be more interested. But somehow I was still losing them because we had this technicality of coding. Right now with AI, that barrier is gone,
Hmm.
right? And actually, and so now I see them much more willing to engage in the question that they are interested in. And so I think that's kind of very nice.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's really cool. The other thing I was thinking is I think the problem in some classes in higher education is that the instructors don't tell their students to use AI, and then you will have this barrier of people that know how to use AI will use AI, and the instructor may think that's cheating, and the students that don't use any AI, and even if they're well prepared, their projects will just not be as polished. And I think that's the discrepancy where I think a lot of professors are really mm, attacking this problem, but it's from the wrong direction. And I like what you're thinking in the way of like, no, everybody's using AI. And if everybody's using AI, this will democratize some of these, let's say, gendered, if they're gendered or not, but whatever, preparation, exposure type problems like coding. It brings them to everyone, but the ideas still matter, right? The
Of course.
creativity, the work they put into it, the ability to just not do like some crappy job and like, oh, I just did it the night before, and here it is, professor, it's amazing, and it won't be
Yeah. Hmm.
because somebody else will have also used the same tools, has access to the same quality tools, but they have reviewed and made their analysis and realized, ah, yeah, I did this, but that's not really what I want to say. And they change
Exactly.
that
Right.
and they'll add better graphics or the plot won't be quite right or whatever. And in doing that, because you are forcing your students to all use it, then you can still see those differences on who are the students that are more prepared and less prepared. And that way, and it also gives all of them experience that they will all need, right? On the job market, they will all need to show how they can use AI to help them be better, be smarter, be faster,
But
and
also, especially because I think that they need to see that if they don't put in the effort, even the world of AI, it will be visible, right? And it's one, and I tell them always, like, look, make all the mistakes you want in this class. There are no costs, right? In a sense, especially because I give them a lot of extra credit opportunity. So make mistakes here because a mistake in the labor market can be way more costly, right? And
yeah,
so this is the moment of learning. And I think that, I mean, it's just the idea of telling people not, I mean, it goes back to like when you didn't allow students to use calculators, right? Eh, or it's almost like saying like don't use Excel to do a graph, right? I mean, do it by hand, point by point with the data. It's hard to understand why, right? I mean, so it, I do think that there are some classes where perhaps it is fair. So I, for example, I wouldn't want to be in one of those creative writing classes, right? That's a different beast. And I would not know how to teach it. I would not know how to incorporate AI or not, right? I mean, I guess. Um, but I think that we all just need to face the reality that even if you tell them not to use it, everyone is using AI. Everyone
yeah,
is using AI, and if we don't accept that fact, then we're kind of like lying to ourselves and
mhm,
causing inequalities. Because then again, like the students who are very ethical, even if they have the AI, they will not use it.
yeah,
Other students may not use it because they don't have the resources to pay for it. And other students will have the resources, but not the ethical, right? And so I think it's better to just try to keep things equal to everyone, just try to figure out ways in which we can use it and not make it detrimental to learning, right? Because in the
yeah.
end, that's what really this is all about.
I teach writing, and AI has been a challenge. I'm not going to say that it has not been, but I have seen brilliant students that in their mind think, oh, AI is cheating. I will not be using any AI for my project. And they literally turn in a project that has brilliance, but they're just not able to bring it where it needs to be because they're not using AI. And I'm almost thinking to me like AI is table stakes, right? You just need that's your entry level. Now, how do we improve upon that? You know, you're doing creative writing and writing poetry. AI can write poetry, but I promise you it's not going to be creative in a good way. And the students will still be able to show that by, using their own style and voice and history and
Well, I mean,
point
again, I
of
mean, for
view
example,
that an AI could
here,
never have.
I mean, one way one perhaps could use it is like saying, creating a bot that says like, okay, you're like the editor of the New
Mhm.
Yorker, and you have to give feedback to
Yeah.
this writing, right? I
Yep.
mean, that's one way to use AI. And again, this is where like the bots are really a
Mhm.
cool tool because you can really create it. And that way, the student is not cheating, right? I mean, again, I mean, even if you think about research, there's like now this huge debate about if we should use AI to improve our writing or not. Some people have had resources to pay for editors to take care of their
Yes.
papers
Correct.
for years, right? And
Yeah.
now it's not. So again, AI may be democratizing a lot of these ways of improving uh, how we communicate, how we write, how we present some of our results. Is that cheating? I'm not sure. I mean,
Yeah.
again,
Where else do you think you might want to use AI in your teaching where you currently are not?
uh, I guess I would like to. I mean, again, I see people doing improvements on their slides and all these other materials that I haven't had the time to update. So, for example, like my slides for this class, I wrote them in some uh, format in R that I can write Python inside and will download the data so it updates the graphs for every 5 years or so. I I still don't know if my graphs are the best given what we know about how we should present the data, etc. Right? Although I try to be very careful in terms of, for example, uh, the color schemes for color blindness and things like that. But I think like AI could do a lot of work to help me improve these things. These are things that of course require time and so slowly we're adapting. I mean that's one part where I would like to do it. um if I was to teach intermediate macro again, so I teach it in a very different way than most people do it today, because I kind of found some ways in which these ideas used to be presented in the 50s or 40s when things were less mathematical and more like using graphs and such. And so I think that there are ways in which one can do this in a modern, in a computer, and students would learn to play with things a little bit better, right? I think that all of these are things that one could use AI to improve the presentation and how the students can interact with these things, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's say that a faculty member in your department comes to you and is like, Omer, I don't know anything about AI, but I see that you're doing really cool things. My students come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, you're not using any AI. What advice would you have to that professor to start using AI in a way that preserves critical thinking and knowledge building and all that, and yet still use the tools?
Well, the first thing is, I think, like if the faculty hasn't been using, the first thing I would invite them is to actually start playing with it, just to see what these things are capable for, like how they can help you in your day-to-day research, etc. And then with that playing around, I think that faculty will come up with ideas on how they may use it or not, right? So, for example, I also have another bot which is just based on my lecture notes, where again, it's kind of the prompt is such that it doesn't provide answers to things. It just helps you study and prepare. But then you can also like tell it like, hey, I want to get 100 question test. Give me 50 multiple choice, 50 with this, and it will provide you. Then you can fill it out, give it back, and the AI will grade it for you and help you understand your error, mistakes and such, right? And so again, this is I think very useful for the teacher and the student, right? Because there's a lot of complaint usually with students that they want more and more exercises. And for us, it's kind of hard to come up with the exercises, like with more variations of the same thing. AI is very good at creating variations. And so it's a nice way of giving more material for students to kind of feel, hey, I have material to prep for the exam, which is such a important part of their semester, right? Um, And at the same time, without it allows the faculty to get rid of part of the whole creation process. Of course, you have to be checking, making sure that the questions are right, etc. But it's not that difficult. I mean, actually, you can incorporate this quite easily.
That's really cool. All right.
Mhm.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to leave a parting thought about how you use AI in the classroom and how that has made it help you do things that before were just not possible?
Um, I don't know. I think that there's one thing I would like to do, which is I always would like to do like something like a Formula One race kind of competition among students in AI, right? So again, if I could do something like, hey, give me your project or like a project idea, and I will have 10 AIs create the same project. You have to beat it.
Mm,
If you cannot beat it, then you're doing something wrong, right? I mean, so in a sense, I would like to be able to force students to see, hey, I have to, I can have AI, but I have to bring something to the table that makes me more than AI, right? I think that's really, and we get sometimes a little bit of this when we have two or three groups doing the same question or related question, but then you can suddenly see like, hey, look, we all have AI, but these guys they did an amazing job. Well, we perhaps didn't do such a great job, right? For to tackle the same question, because how we did it graphically, or the data we used, or the way we presented it. But if we could do this kind of like individualized, right, so that you can actually see like, hey, I'm really lagging here. I have these problems, and how can I improve? That would be an amazing way of improving pedagogy and how the students learn, right?
that's very cool. All right, Omar. Thank you so
Okay.
much
No,
for
thank you.
sharing your knowledge and thoughts about AI. I hope lots of people will see this and they will want to experiment, try it out, because I don't know, I think there's lots of benefits that can happen there. And the more we as professors know about AI and are familiar with AI, the more we'll understand the needs of our students, what is pushing them towards AI, and then we can help them take that desire to make things faster, easier, whatever for the students, but also preserve, the learning objectives that we're looking for. So
Indeed.
anyway, thank you so much for this conversation. If you'd like to explore more faculty projects and practical examples of AI at SMU in terms of teaching and research, visit our online repository of these kinds of podcasts and projects at ai-studio.smu.edu. And that is a wrap. Thank you, Omer.
Thank you.